Welcome back, everybody. We are going to tackle episode 4. I hope you're all well. I hope you have been having successful weeks and have not been too troubled. I'm going to carry on with the story. Now, just as a forewarning, I did mention in the previous episode, at the end of the episode, that this next episode and potentially the next 2 to 3 will be covering the circumstances around Mariana's death. It was a traumatic death, I'm sorry to say. It was horrific. It was the stuff of nightmares. It wasn't easy for me. It wasn't easy on Mariana. Certainly wasn't easy on anybody that witnessed or was involved or played a part. Anybody that was close to her at all. It was 3 days that really encompassed and included everything significant, really, that around the end of Mariana's life. She'd been working for the hotels for a time, which is obviously where we met, and then eventually she moved. She got an opportunity to go to a place called Gazelle House, which was like a holistic sort of spa in Knightsbridge, South Kent. And she did really well there. She loved it, although she often spoke about how the energy was sometimes difficult. There were a lot of people who were very unwell there, her colleagues, and people who were coming in and using the facilities were often quite unwell. One of the wondrous skills that Mariana had as a human being, I mean, it's arguable, perhaps part angel, was that she would have, uncontrollably so, she would have an exchange with you. If she spoke to you, if she engaged with you, she would give you some of her energy, and she'd take, unknowingly, I mean, to a level, to a degree, she'd take yours, and she'd take your bad energy and give you her good. And this was unfortunately, I think, something that played a part in her death, but she was a very, very powerful person. She was very powerful spiritually and very connected to her purpose, I guess, and her strengths in life as a character and a human. She just signed a contract to become the new spa manager of Curtain Road, which was actually going to be, I think it started off as Mondrian Curtain Road, and then they changed the names. I don't remember. Anyway, she'd finished her studies as a naturopathic nutritionist, and we had just been travelling around Portugal. We'd spent 3 weeks. Unfortunately, I'd been made redundant, but we'd come into a bit of money because of that, and we'd been looking at maybe buying some land. Her mother was still in Lisbon, so we travelled all around the south and looked at like sort of old ruins and land. But we sort of dreamed of a holistic retreat with some farmland. I love animals and I love horses, and I'm a big fan of piggies to keep and to eat, and I love them. I've always wanted to keep piggies. So we'd gone on that trip, and we'd been back for maybe, I think we were out there for about 3 weeks, because we'd recently gotten Zeus, and I'd left him with my brother and my mum to take care of. So yeah, we'd got back like early September. I think we'd gone late August, early September. Anyway, we had an amazing time, and we actually found a couple of places that we were really interested in. This period of time, obviously everything's going great. Mariana's working and about to move to this new wonderful spa and set it up, and her dream job, really. The reason I mentioned it before is because it is prevalent. The effect that her sort of exchange would have on her started to become very, very apparent. So on the Thursday, Mariana passed on a Sunday, and on the Thursday she came home. The Thursday night, I'd been celebrating because we'd both been kind of angling towards me getting my motorcycle test done and license done, and we both liked the idea of me getting a bike and riding, and initially riding together, and then Mariana had liked the idea of riding bikes as well, so maybe doing hers. And we'd been planning what bike to get, and anyway, so I'd celebrated. We were celebrating on the Thursday because I'd passed my theory test. And I remember the text exchange. I was coming home on the bus and we were both so excited and hungry, and we got some takeaway, and she'd gotten home that night and she was exhausted. She was so tired, and she kept telling stories about the colleagues that were sadly very, very unwell and were having quite a taxing cost on her exchanges with each of those people. And she was worried about it. She mentioned it because she was worried about it, and she recognised that something was starting to change. She kept saying, something's happening to me. And she had a bit of a rough night that Thursday night. She fell asleep eventually, but got little sleep. Anyway, she went to work on the Friday, and she came home that Friday night, and something had changed again. And I notice it now. I perhaps wasn't as aware at the time, although I did recognise some signals, and did react. She was just a little... Well, no, on the Friday she was very, very anxious. She got home and she was extremely anxious. She couldn't sleep. She was getting into a panic. And I'd seen sort of her have anxiety problems, or not panic attacks, but issues with her anxiety once or twice, but never anything serious. And this was by far the worst that I'd ever seen her. She was irritated. She was very, very upset. She needed to calm herself down by calling her sister. Her sister lives in Brazil, so she spoke with her sister Mafalda, and they had a long chat, and Mafalda recommended that Mariana speak with her friend Renata, who's a psychological guide, if you like, but qualified. I think she's a psychotherapist. Anyway, so they spoke, and it was mostly in Portuguese, but I understood quite a bit, and I was involved. And Renata actually explained everything to me, that she thought Mariana was having a panic attack, and by this point it's very late in the night. And then she just advised us to sort of give her some cups of tea and try and calm her down, do some deep breathing. And Mariana was sort of still obsessing a bit, and wanted to call her guide in Brazil, her spiritual guide, which she did, and she spoke with one of them. And again, he kind of suggested a similar thing, that it'd be best just to try and treat it as a bit of a panic attack and an anxiety attack, and just try and work on your breathing and have some tea, and eventually just try and get some rest. And like I said, I was getting aware of her worry, and I'd not seen that in her before. I'd not seen her scared of anxiety or panic or she wasn't fearful in life. She wasn't, far from it. She didn't usually hesitate. She was sometimes uncertain of decisions, and there was a big decision playing on her mind. I mean, it was, this trip that I'd mentioned before of her going to Brazil to graduate in her spiritual faith and become a guide for others was very, very significant. And she wasn't sure whether she wanted to do it or not. And that was, I think, probably playing on her mind a lot. We'd bought the tickets for her to go. So she'd had all the flights arranged, and she was going to be staying with her dad. And there was nothing in the sense of the logistics that was bothering her, but there were some other reasons, and she wasn't sure whether she wanted to do it or not anymore. This reading that we'd had back in Portugal from her mum's guide, I think, had probably played a part. Anyway, we finally managed to get her settled, and the morning came, the Saturday morning, and neither of us were working. We were both off that day. And she woke up, I woke up and she wasn't there, which wasn't necessarily that unusual. Zeus wasn't there either. She'd obviously taken him out for a walk. I'm assuming this, I'm assuming all this because I never really found out. And I got a bit, I suppose initially I got a little bit worried, but I didn't really think on it much. I just fell asleep. I went back to sleep. It was just Saturday morning. I was snoozing. And I guess I snoozed for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, and I woke up about 10:30, 11:15, and she still wasn't home. And that's when I sort of got up and I thought, well, hold on a minute, this is a bit weird. because that was unusual for her to be around out for that long. We only lived next to the park. I mean, literally right next to it. And Zeus was a small dog. Although he had bags of energy, she could have gone for a cup of coffee, I suppose. But it was unusual, and she would have told me. And I hadn't had any messages, and then I heard a knock on the door, and it was Muddy. And I went down the stairs, like this spiral staircase we had, and I opened the door, and she just sort of looked different. She looked vacant. She looked like it wasn't her. I mean, she looked so different. She looked like a lost child. She had that sort of fear in her eyes. And she didn't say anything. She was just sort of stood at the door, holding the dog. She didn't have any shoes on. I couldn't see her bag anywhere, so she didn't have her phone. And I sort of looked and I said, Murray, Bubba, where have you been? And she didn't say anything. And she looked at me and she said, Bubba, where have I been? And I don't know what. I think I just got her inside. And I started kind of asking questions like, "What? But Murray, why didn't you take any shoes? Where's your bag? Where's your phone?" And she ran off again. She left the dog. She left me. She just ran off, and she said, "Oh, my phone." And she came back about 10 minutes later. She was still barefoot. And again, this is not normal behaviour for my wife. She was very, very full of love and life, but that was erratic. And she sounded different. She wasn't talking anymore. She wasn't talking to me. She was looking through me, or like with fear and curiosity. And then she came back and we sat down, and well, we didn't sit down because she kept getting irate. She kept just pacing around saying, I need to call my folder. I need to call her. Where's my folder? And then she kept saying, oh, she's downstairs. And I need to go and open the door for her. And I was like, Bubba, she's not downstairs. We spoke to her last night. And she got upset. She started calling me names. She started getting aggressive and violent. And again, this is nothing, way out of character. I'd never ever seen her swear at me. I mean, maybe once or twice in a row, but never like that. And she got violent. I mean, she got violent with me. She tried to kick me and punch me, and I sort of backed away, and initially unsure of what the hell was going on. And then she kept trying to go. She kept trying to just go downstairs again to out the house. And by this point, I'm so worried that I started to think, okay, hold on a minute, I need to do something about this. I need to try and restrain her. And I did. I restrained her by just sort of holding my arms round her back, and I'm sort of. I suppose you could probably hear the panic in my voice, but I'm just begging her to calm down and trying to reassure her that it was going to be okay. We were going to get some help, and we would talk to her sister. And she bit my arm, kicked my legs, and broke free. And at that point, I just thought, I don't know what else to do. I called my mum. Shows what a flipping mummy's boy I am. I'm not, but I didn't know what else to do, so I called my mum, and they were very close. And I sort of screamed at mum over the phone, Mum, I don't know what's happening. Something's happening to Murray. Please come over if you can, or I don't know what to do. And she said, call an ambulance. So I did. I got off the phone, I called an ambulance. And the first people to show up, and all this while I'm waiting for the ambulance, as I'm holding her and still taking the kicks and taking the bites on my arm and the name calling, and the knock on the door came, and I managed to get us down the stairs. I'm holding her. I mean, I'm still really holding her, and I opened the door, and she sort of bolted straight out. She didn't even hesitate into the arms of 4 male police officers who were the first on the scene, and then they immediately responded by trying to, restrain her. But it took all 4 of them. She was tiny, but at this point, she was violently aggressively strong. I mean, like, I don't know how she got that strength or where it came from, but it was unlike her. I mean, I knew she was strong, but she was never that strong. She was still screaming and shouting. I remember the police officers when they got her up into the upper part of the studio and they put their handcuffs on her. I was so upset with them. I didn't want them to do that, but they didn't know what else to do. And I made sure when the copper went upstairs that one of them, I made him stand in front of the door to the roof terrace. I don't know why, but I suppose it was open and I wanted to make sure that she couldn't get out. I think I'll stop there for now. I'll carry on the next episode because it's just going to be too long if I keep going into this. There's a lot more, unfortunately. We were eventually taken to hospital, so I'll carry on there. And I'm not going to go into too graphic detail, but I do feel it's important to tell the story of what happened to her. Not just from a perverse sense of pleasing people's curiosity or answering the questions, but because there were things that fundamentally went wrong with some of the systems that we were presented with, and some of the things that happened left scars that I'll never ever be able to heal. And I want to do this because I'm doing this because I need people to see that we can still be okay. Somehow, I'm still here and I haven't given up. All right, gang. Sorry, it is an emotional ride, this one. Stick with me. Thanks a lot. See you next time.